Hello and welcome to another microclass from Disasterwise, a series of quick 10-minute dives into the myths, maths and management of crisis and disaster. Today I'll be talking about the disaster risk management cycle. The cycle is made up of 6 distinct but overlapping phases with 3 subphases, and we'll take a look at each of these in a bit more detail in a minute. Since each phase can begin with the letter R, the cycle can be represented graphically as a form of R-train, which is my joke, which will be familiar to anyone who's ever used the New York City subway system. When used for reducing disaster risk, integrating each phase moves affected communities on from the doom loop of respond, recover, repeat. That's the aim. Risk reduction is the cornerstone of integrated disaster risk management. It starts with the identification and analysis of risk and is essential to the anticipation, reduction, and eventual prevention of the direct, indirect, and interdependent compounding and cascading consequences of disaster. Resilience refers to the ability of communities and households within complex systems to anticipate and adapt to risks, and to absorb, respond, and recover from shocks and stresses in a timely and effective manner without compromising their long-term prospects, ultimately improving their well-being. This, at least, is the definition used by GOAL, the Irish NGO. This means reducing vulnerability and exposure while building local coping capacities. And this, in turn, means putting greater emphasis on what communities can do for themselves. Building such shock-absorbing and adaptive capability does not necessarily require more spending, but a reprioritization of resources. One of the risk indicators I mentioned here is the access to cash, credit, and insurance. A stitch in time saves 9. When it comes to managing disaster risk, this aphorism has proven that investing in risk reduction prior to an event, think flood defenses, early warning systems, evacuation planning, contingency planning, stockpiling, that kind of thing, minimizes the damage, the loss of life, and the long-term economic and social consequences of the response. All organizations and individuals that might have a role to play in emergency response and recovery should be properly prepared and be clear about their roles and responsibilities. That is what getting ready means. The first few days of any disaster response concentrates on search and rescue. For a mass casualty event, such as an earthquake or tsunami, this phase is usually called off after about 12 days. Needs are assessed and resources mobilized throughout the first 30 days, including during these first 12 days, as the response phase gathers momentum around it, tailing off after 3 to 6 months, depending on the scale of the disaster. A principle of coordination established at the outset is that decisions should be taken at the lowest appropriate level, with coordination at the highest necessary level. Local agencies are the building blocks of response and recovery. Recovery takes place in 2 stages. Early recovery focuses on quick impact projects aimed at immediate restoration of livelihoods, and such projects are likely to involve short-term cash for work initiatives, including debris clearance and recovering salvageable materials for possible reuse. After Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, which felled over 30 million palm trees, 10,000 chainsaws were brought in by the UN to clear roads during the first few weeks of response, which were later followed by over 200 mobile sawmills, thus not just accelerating early recovery, but establishing an entirely new lumber industry, an entirely new and sustainable source of income. Usually applied to complex or protracted political crises, stabilization is about building social cohesion, preventing conflict, and meeting security challenges. It assumes an integrated approach to risk reduction across the humanitarian, development, and peace-building nexus, and focuses on the work needed to coherently address people's vulnerability before, during, and after crises. Disaster risk financing is about distributing, sharing, and diluting individual risk using cash, credit, and insurance instruments. And finally, disasters afford an opportunity to build back better. This means complying with building codes when reconstructing, and resettlement away from, or in the case of floods and storm surges, above hazard-prone areas could also be considered. So here are the slides all put together as a kind of mind map. It's indicative, not comprehensive, and it makes more sense when seen, at least to me, as a New York-style R-train subway map. Well, thanks for your time. I hope you found this short presentation useful. If you want to know more about the disaster risk management cycle or any other disaster-related topic, please take a look at disasterwise.org, where you can also subscribe. Stay safe wherever you are, and until the next time, goodbye.